The Yzma technology in Amethyst Steel looks to be pretty good in this matchup here. Just for demo purposes, I'm going to show you some of the interactions up against a Sapphire Ruby deck when we're on the draw. Obviously on the play is even stronger because you're able to develop your ink faster and get the Yzma down a turn early with one less card in hand, making her ability much easier to proc. That being said though, this particular version of Ruby Sapphire is the version that runs a small anti-aggro package, as you can see here in the Queen of Hearts. And so how does that actually interact with a deck like this? Does it put us behind, or what struggles might we have here? Because you're going to run into mid-range decks and control decks that have anti-aggro packages. And this is one of the reasons why the Steel Amethyst version of Hyper Aggro is a little bit more resilient in my opinion than the Amber variations, is because like I talked about in the deck profile, which is linked in the description, you have a number of ways to recycle your cards so that you're not really falling behind in card advantage. So you can see me use the Broom effect to banish and draw once I've quested, so it's not sitting there vulnerable. It got me the lore, it's got me card advantage back, and I can just play readied up threats again. The Diablo here, the interaction using the crab in order to give it Challenger 3 in order to take out an opposing threat while replacing itself is nice, but obviously I'd prefer questing, but I do need to manage the board state just a little bit here. The crab is definitely pretty useful because, for example, you can see this board state here. If the opponent kind of just was able to run away with this Hiram questing, without a doubt I would just lose. They would out advantage me, they would start dropping the big Sisus, be prepared, and I would just lose the game. Now, them getting two full cycles of the Hiram off and playing it and questing with it here to draw a total of 4 cards is really bad for me, but thankfully they don't have Mauis or anything to hard check me at this moment in time. They do play a small Sisu, which gets rid of my Mickey Mouse unfortunately, so at least I quested with it. But now we have an interaction where we can play the Fox, bounce back the Crab, and take out the Hiram in one swoop. Playing the Goat on the previous turn, you could argue, I don't know if I would say it was a misplay, because I could have played the Snake and the Cusco, but I wanted to keep the Crab on board for after the Hiram was exerted, so I could bounce it back during this turn here and get the utility off of the Fox taking out the Hiram with the 7 strength after the Crab boost. So this what this also does here in this scenario is isolate me from a big Sishu shift, which you're going to see come down here from the CPU. They do take out my Cusco, but it's nothing lost there, right? The Cusco was freed last turn. I just had leftover ink. I played it. It replaces itself. And if anything, it maybe forces the opponent in hand to say, you know, I'm going to have to get this big Sisu out anyways. Maybe I have another one in hand. Let me just get it out now and get rid of that extra quest that the opponent's going to get off that Cusco. And then the benefit is this Fox goes 2 for 1. It takes out a big threat in the big Sisu. It took out a Hiram. The Fox got tremendous value here. The opponent's on 4 cards. I was on 4 cards. We're on equal lore more or less. Well, now I'm at 8. But you can see the game state is kind of equal. The issue is against these control decks, the longer the game goes on, the more of a disadvantage I'm going to be at. The opponent has another Hiram, which is really unfortunate. They're at 8 ink now, and now I'm severely at risk of getting be prepared. And it's at this point where you just have to go for it, and you say, you know, you have to have it in order to win the game. So we go for Yzma and Doc, which draws us 2. And then next turn we'll be able to Yzma for 3 if our Yzma doesn't get outed. Now, of course, people might still be playing Madame Medusa, which is also a problem for this Yzma. Thankfully, though, this build isn't. They're on 4 big Sisu and 3 Be Prepareds. They do drop a Tamatoa, which indicates they're absolutely not on Be Prepared right now. They need to draw into it. And this interaction basically wins us the game. What we need in this scenario is to get a Pete. So you're going to see me end up inking the Mr. Smee and playing out the Chernobog followers here, and then using the Yzma to draw 3, and thankfully we draw the Pete on the 3rd draw there, which is going to basically win us the game at this point, because even if a big Sisu comes down, enough of our board will survive that we won't lose everything, and we can continue questing out for game next turn. So despite dropping that Pete, you know, we still don't have game. We're going to have to survive another turn. We do banish the Chernobog to draw, so we get a Mickey Mouse there, and we have a Diablo in hand. The Tamatoa is going to quest, get back an item. They do indeed have another big Sisu, and just look at the sequence that the CPU is going to put through here. They're going to ink, drop or popsicle, quest with Hiram, draw 2 more. Like, they've got a full grip, but it's just too little too late at this point. Thankfully, they didn't have to be prepared on the turn that it mattered, and we were able to clutch out the game with the P. Now I'm just BMing the CPU a little bit. Yeah, use the Yzma effect to draw instead of just quest for game. Play out the Calhoun, which, you know, unfortunately I didn't draw it earlier on where it could have had a lot of utility, but that's fine. Take out the Hiram and just quest for game, or I think I take game by crashing Goat into the Tamatoa there, but I do end up outing most of the opponent's board, leaving them with just a big Sisu while still having a big board. But without a doubt, you'll see at the end of the game, if you look at the opponent's hand when it's revealed, they did eventually draw into that Be Prepared, so we would have lost next turn if we couldn't clutch out the game here. So that's going to do it for the control matchup. Hopefully you can see some of the interactions that you want to go for and why building a deck this way is kind of important. So while you can build this deck to have a little bit of resiliency against control decks and Ruby decks in particular, one of the cruxes of hyper aggro in general, no matter what variation you choose, is going to be Emerald Steel, which I do think is going to still be around in the meta, as it is still pretty powerful in a couple of different variations. In this particular matchup, we go second, the opponent puts down a Diablo on turn 1. Not that they really needed to do that since they saw our hand with the 1-drop Diablo, but it doesn't make a difference here. And not having an answer to Diablo is definitely going to be a problem, but more so having to try and deal with the double singing Ursulas and stuff is even more of a problem. So for this reason, in Emerald Steel, you could opt to run a couple of removal spells. The Befuddle won't do it here since Diablo on the shift, the Devoted Herald costs 3 and Befuddle only hits 2 or less cost characters or items. So we're in a little bit of trouble here. You can't really try to play through a Diablo. If, again, my Yu-Gi-Oh players, think of it as akin to Maxi. You need to deal with this Diablo. It's like a mini game. If you don't deal with it, the amount of cards that they draw, the amount of gas that they have in particular with drawing into Steel Songs and very powerful end game removal options like Tinkerbell and even, you know, Beast Tragic Hero and stuff, can be extremely detrimental. Here you can see the opponent is going a little wide, and these evasive cards are just things that I can't answer. Not that I would want to anyways as an aggro deck, but I'm in a really bad spot here because these Maleficents have no way of being protected. I just have to quest out with them, and I just don't really have a game plan. One Diablo really does end the game against aggro deck. So with that in mind, you know, we'll play this out and you'll kind of see just how close we can get if we attempt to play it out. But obviously at a certain point you reach a threshold where as soon as they start dropping some of those bigger Floodborn characters like the Tinkerbell and or Beast Tragic Hero, it's just a foregone conclusion, right? You have to be very mindful though if you're going to attempt to play this matchup. Again, probably trying to tech in some steel removal if you know that Diablos are going to be prevalent in your meta. But you got to be very careful of how you choose to draw cards. Keep note that Diablo doesn't draw during their own turn. It only draws when you draw during your turn. So for example, do I want to draw off Magic Broom, or do I want to crash my Diablo and draw off of it during my turn? No, I probably want to wait for them to use their characters to take up my Diablo and my Cuscos so that I draw during their turn, preventing the extra draws off of their Diablos. However, once I see this Ursula Deceiver of All come down, you just know you're in a really rough spot. The Calhoun could potentially do some work if they didn't have a song, but you know, they're not going to exert a non-evasive character to play into the Calhoun anyways. And it's kind of crazy, right? Calhoun directly would take out the Ursula Deceiver, but they drop a Baboom on a character there, and then I think they crashed, and then they double sing Strength. Yeah, so they just absolutely just decimate the board, and just like that, you know, I mean, they have no cards left in hand basically, but neither do we, and we have no board presence, and they still have these evasive threats, and they still have Maxi, aka Diablo, on board. So you can just see how tough it is. What kind of actions would you think to play? I mean, if you play Babooms, you run the risk of it not being enough if they're on Hidden Cove. If you run Strength of the Raging Fire, that could be an option since you go pretty wide on your board, but sometimes that card can be dead. And you really only get the maximum utility off of Strength when you double sing it with Ursula Deceiver of All, just in case you need to double up on one character. So I'm not sure what else you'd play. You don't want to play something like a Zeus. It's too expensive. It's not inkable. There is that Tug of War card, but I think that costs 5, so you're not really going to be playing that either. Let me know in the comment section below if you've made it this far in the video what options you would play in the Hyper Aggro deck in order to help combat Diablo. Is Babooms enough? Is Strength of the Raging Fire enough? Is Let It Go, or not Let It Go, geez, Let the Storm Rage On going to be enough? Do you maybe look to put in some evasive threats, right? There's a couple of steel cards that have evasive during your turn. There's a couple of amethyst cards that just straight up have evasive. I do think that the evasive option is a little bit weaker. But you could run something like Peter Pan Shadow. Again, it quests for... Wait, the Shadow Finder is the one that costs 3. The Peter Pan Shadow is the one that quests for 2. Is a 2/3 body, is a 4 cost uninkable. And it gives your other evasives or it gives your other characters with Rust evasive, so it would give the Madam Mim Fox evasive as well. So there are a couple of options, but yeah, you can see that we just got absolutely outclassed. So let me know what solutions you would have to adapt the Hyper Aggro deck to have a better matchup against Emerald Steel.